I've spent years in teamwork and group work compensating for other people, picking up the slack, redoing their work if it wasn't good. And I thought this made me a good teammate, but I realized that it doesn't. And this is what this episode is going to go into, is why picking up for other people, compensating, or being a social loafer isn't actually effective for a functional team, and also how to be a good teammate, which is fundamental for your career and also just relationships in general. Welcome back to Clearly Becoming, a podcast that empowers ambitious 20-somethings build clarity about who they are and not just what they do. Because I really believe that career transitions are catalysts for personal evolution. And also remember that you can be ambitious and also confused at the same time. So let's get into it. I feel like we all can relate that we've been in a group project or something and there's one member that just goes silent or never does any of the work. And I definitely feel this. I have been in a lot of group work as a business student and also just in high school as well. And I have my fair share of bad group projects and things like that, and members that just don't participate for whatever reason. And I feel like this is a really big, just university problem and in the workforce as well. And I feel like this is a really common thing for Gen Z, especially because of the pandemic. Actually, 46% of Gen say that the pandemic has derailed their career in some format. And Forbes attributes this to the fact that because of the pandemic and because we were online, we didn't develop those soft skills that are so necessary for collaboration. We missed the in-person negotiation. We missed speaking up. We missed conflict resolution, all of those bits that build the foundation for what a good group needs. It really is eye-opening to me about how much the pandemic affected our lives. I think one of the misinterpretations of our generation in Gen Z is that we aren't conscientious, we're not disciplined, we're not ambitious, but we are those things. It's just that we don't know always how to communicate it like the older generations have in the past. And it's also that this dynamic in the economy is so much different than other generations. I mean, we are growing up with AI, we are digitally native. Well, I'm still working on that, but most of our generation is digitally native. But I think it's just so interesting that we as a generation have faced a lot of changing career dynamic. I mean, not only with technology, but also just with the ability to be entrepreneurs from the get-go and run a startup and do all of those things. And it's so changing. And now we're seeing a lot of non-linear where we are able to switch jobs. We don't have to stay in the same job for 20 plus years. We can change, we can grow, we can adapt and transfer our skills so much more. And while all of that is great, it's just gives us so much choice, which then goes into that choice paralysis on what do I do? What is my dream? Who am I? And it leads to all that identity crisis. And to bring it back into the collaboration aspect is that we don't really know how to interact with other people because we don't even know ourselves. We don't even know how to manage ourselves sometimes. And if you can't manage yourself, how are you supposed to manage other people in a group? I definitely feel like in group projects where somebody hasn't spoken up or somebody hasn't done the work, and then you do it yourself because you're like, oh, they can't do it, they're not good enough, or if it's not up to par on what you like, then you're just like, oh, I'll just do it because I know how to make it better. And then you smile in the meetings and you're like, oh, it's okay that you didn't do your work, but really inside, or maybe you're chatting with a friend or whatever, you are saying, oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. Like that member still hasn't done all that work. That member thinks they deserve this grade even though they didn't put in any effort. Like, how did they think like that? Or I don't understand why they're not speaking up. I don't understand why they're not being proactive. It isn't my job to ask other people to give their opinion. And that frustration at home, that silence that you're just bubbling up inside, that isn't actually productive for forming a good group. And the point of group work is to hear other people's perspectives, leverage other people's strengths, and utilize their different knowledge of whatever the topic is to create something that is even better than you could have produced on your own. And that's what you're missing in group work. That's what I'm missing in group work. It's that ability to leverage and utilize your other teammates to form something that is great and not just good on your own. Because we forget, there's a saying like, many hands make light work. And that is so true because you're all pitching in and you're doing it, but it's a choice to be a team and to have a good collaborative environment. One of the things that I was learning in one of my classes is called the Belbin Team Roles. And it basically told me in an academic language what I already knew about myself and who I was and how I fit into a group work and a group project. And I think it's really eye opening to see who you are. So I definitely advise you to take the test. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt. You don't have to confine yourself to one role. I think you can be multiple roles because as humans, we're multifaceted. And also, you can change roles. I've taken this test numerous of times and I've realized that I've hopped to different roles just because of who I've grown and who I've developed into. And so, definitely don't think just because you have this one role that you can't go into a different one in the future. I think I fall into three roles. I will put a link down below if you want to take the quiz and see which role you are. But my three roles is a complete finisher, which I definitely feel like has changed a little bit. I'm not as much of a complete finisher as I am when I was maybe starting university. But a complete finisher is when you kind of notice a gap and you have this instinct to fix it immediately. Like you can't move on to something else until you finish that one thing. And you also can't hand in anything that is not up to your standard. And so that's where if somebody doesn't do something good enough in your mind, then you just fix it without even telling them. You don't even ask them to change it or but you just think, I know what to do. I'll do it myself. And then the implementer just does it. And that's where I was talking about it. You're capable, you're efficient, you think that you can do it faster than waiting for other people to do it. And I definitely just did this recently where, and it's so silly, like we had to create a presentation, like a slide presentation into a Word document with the annotations underneath the slides. And you have to do like the export into like the print with notes or whatever, or handout document, whatever computer that you're using. And I was trying to do it, and then somebody was like, "Oh, I'll just take screenshots and I'll copy and paste the notes down below." And I was like, "Okay," but I was like, "No, but I really want to do this. I really want to print the handout notes with the slides down below." And so then I just ended up doing it myself, and I was like, and now I think about it, I'm like, why did I do that? Why didn't I just let that other person do the screenshot and the notes? It would have been the same thing. And then it wouldn't have been this whole ordeal where everything was changing on the tables and slides and you had to refix the layout and whatever it was. I made it so much more complicated for myself just because I wanted to do it myself and not depend on somebody else. And I talked about that in my attachment episode about how your attachment filters into like your career and group dynamics. And I definitely feel like that's where my attachment style came in. It's that avoidant, just not wanting to be dependent on other people. And so it's just so eye opening to me how like everything is connected. And then my third one is the coordinator, and that's the person that likes to avoid friction and conflict and build a harmonious environment for people and also normally allocates roles and tasks to other people. And with all of these roles, they have their strengths and they also have their weaknesses. And so with the coordinator, it's more about you'd rather reorganize around the problem than actually address it itself, which then basically doesn't let the other person be accountable for their actions. And so all of these roles, they do have their strengths and they do have their weaknesses. But in a dysfunctional team, as I've gave an example before of maybe when people aren't doing their work, my strengths actually become the system that protects the loafer. And I miss out on that conflict stage. And I was just watching a video by Patrick, and he was talking about the 5 things that make a dysfunctional team. And it was trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and then the results. And it's really interesting because I feel like I get stuck at the conflict phase because I'm a coordinator and also because I like to reorganize around the problem instead of actually address it. And I bubble down that frustration. That is where I'm not able to allow that conflict to come into pass to get to that commitment stage. And it's kind of like dating in a way, if you want to think about it like that. It's that you really need to be open and honest about what your values are, about what is going on, creating an environment that it's safe for other people to share their ideas and for you not to always agree on it because everybody has different perspectives. Not everybody's going to get along, not everybody has the same thoughts, and that's okay. But you need to be able to have a place where you can share those in a safe space and that you can feel that you're able to communicate what you want. And without the conflict, you'll never reach that commitment stage. And I've always been so afraid of conflict, and I've talked about this a lot, especially in my communication episodes. So definitely check that out. But conflict is connection, as I talked about. And you need to be able to have those tough conversations to get you to where you want to go. Because then, if not, you're staying in this familiar place and then you're not really going anywhere. You have a familiarity bias, and it's very surface level, and you're not really getting to the groundwork of who they are, what they want, and how you can build something together. Instead, in university, we tend to call teamwork as just getting together, allocating the tasks, sending everybody else to do their individual little things, and then coming back and maybe brushing it up a little bit just so then it connects with everybody. But that's not real collaboration because you're not actually coming together and working and sharing ideas and building something that can be so monumental and significant. And so I think it's just really important to remember that teamwork is a commitment. You have to put in the effort to make sure it is a good collaboration with other people. And I just wanted to bring in this concept by Laten, who coined this term in 1979, and it's called social loafing. Basically, this concept talks about as how effort drops in a group, especially larger groups, when accountability isn't there. There's probably two reasons why this happens, and it's because, well, they think that, oh, because I'm in a group, other people will do my share of the work and it won't be really visible if I do it or not. And that's the free rider problem, which in economics, you just ride along with everybody else because you're in this big group. So it doesn't matter what I do, my contribution isn't worth it. Or it's about apathy, it's the indifference to the group. It's like, it doesn't really matter to me if I do well or not. And then it's also the social disconnectedness. It's when you feel like you aren't actually in that part of the group, which ties back into Patrick's the 5 things that make a dysfunctional team. It's so important to have that trust, to establish that environment where you can talk and you can share. I honestly feel like this is why a lot of companies have that happy hour, is to build those relationships, not just professional, but personal relationships with each other, so that you can become a team that feels that they can share their opinions and their perspectives without it being negatively perceived in that sense. And then there's also the sucker effect, which I feel like is a funny name, but it's basically when you overcompensate for another person's work and then team performance actually drops. Because you're not really saving the team, you're subsidizing the system for that loafer to do what they're doing. It's free riding. And so you're not really helping the problem when you're overcompensating because they're not able to take that accountability, which is one of the 5 things of a dysfunctional team. I just think it's really interesting on how this all ties together is that you might think that you're doing something that helps, but really are you? Because I thought I was when I was compensating for other people's work, but really I'm not because I'm letting that person get away with it. I'm rewarding their behavior that it's okay to be a social loafer and then they'll continue doing that. And I think that it's not my job to get other people to be proactive and do the work. Like, it's not my job to tell somebody to ask for what they need to do in the group work. Or if they don't understand something, then I blame them because I think, well, you have the brief, you know what you're doing. Why aren't you advocating for yourself? Why aren't you asking to do the work? Well, maybe they don't feel like they can. Maybe it's one of those Belbin roles where they feel like maybe their skills aren't up to par or whatever it might be. And then I'm not giving them the chance to even feel that, or I'm not even recognizing that it might be hard for them. And so maybe it isn't my job, but can I change the system? And this is what the cooler effect is. It's when group success depends on the weakest link, and then people will work harder and not less. So design shapes that behavior. And so what if you thought that maybe that person that wasn't participating or wasn't being proactive? What if that loafer is in a team where the system is bad? It's not them that's bad, but the system, the design of the group is not what they're used to or it's conducive for them. Well, then how can you design a system that is? And this is where you have to be proactive, recognize maybe other people's tendencies and that maybe it's not your job, but how can you still work around it instead of just complaining about why isn't this person working? Why isn't this person taking action? Well, maybe I have to be the one to be like, hey, what's up? Why aren't you feeling like you can't add into this conversation? Or what do you think about this? Oh, you don't understand it? What do you not understand about it? Not just leave it at, oh, I don't understand, and be like, oh, okay, well, I've done my share. No, you have to be able to really understand what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and create that environment that they feel safe to maybe be a little bit more vulnerable than they might have been in the previous moments. And it's really interesting to me what happens in the brain when you have a really good team. And what happens is that cohesive teams, your brain waves actually synchronize. They line up, which is just absolutely insane to me how as humans our brains can do that. But it's called this interbrain synchrony. And basically the oxytocin rises and that relationship bonding. Also creative output is on a high and your amygdala isn't as on fire basically. But when you're in a dysfunctional team, that amygdala fires. It raises so much higher and the cortisol spikes, that stress level. And it's not that cortisol isn't bad, it is, but it like goes way too above the baseline and above where the healthy state is. And basically everybody's defaulting into this self-protection mode. And so that tension you feel, that's not drama, that's actually you trying to protect yourself. And then that's where that rational thinking isn't able to come. And so when I'm in those dysfunctional teams of when I'm overcompensating for maybe other people's work and things like that, well, it's my amygdala that is firing. I'm feeling like I'm having to protect myself. I'm protecting myself in terms of I want a good grade. And that's what I'm thinking about. And then I'm not able to think rationally about is it the person or is it actually the system that's not working? And it can be both. I mean, some people maybe just aren't good teammates, but I honestly feel like you create what you live. And I always ask myself, how am I subsidizing the system? How am I perpetrating this issue? Is it me? Is it what I'm doing? Or is it somebody else? And you really have to ask yourself that because if it is you, well, then how can you change it? And then if it's someone else, well, then how can you change your attitude around it? Because remember, other people don't control your emotions, though you have to really be cognizant of what you're letting in and who is affecting you because you are the one in charge of how you can create your life and build your life. And this isn't to say that I haven't had really amazing group work. I have. I actually had one recently in one of my, it's funny, a lot of them have been in consulting projects. You're really forced to work together because you have a client. And that client is probably talking to you, especially if it's a startup. They're talking to you every single week. It's the changing dynamics because they haven't built their business yet. And so everything is changing. Things are moving at a mile per minute and it's chaotic. And so you as a group, you really have to be working together because if not, then your allocated roles won't make sense in a changing landscape that is so fast paced. I really do feel like these groups are probably one of the best ones because we've been able to converse, we're able to talk to each other in real time. I think trying to meet with your group in person is imperative. For me, working online is really hard to read those social cues, and I tend to get distracted. I tend to tune out because I can do other things. I'm not with them in the space. And then I'm also feel like I'm not held accountable for my actions because nobody is there in the room with me. But when I'm in the room, my screen is down, or maybe, my screen isn't down, but we're all working together. It's clear that we're working on the same topic. And so I really advocate for working in person. Obviously, if you can't, you have to do some online, that's fine. But I also think it just saves you time when you work in person because you're able to hone in for that X amount of hours or whatever it is, and you're able to get that thing done. But that's just my view on teamwork. I forgot what I was talking about. Anyways, here's some things that I think we can do to become better teammates and to create a better collaborative environment and system. These are the things that I'm actively testing in my group work that I have right now because I have a lot of it. I think I have 3 group work in this semester, in this term. It's been good and it's also been challenging. So these are the 3 things that I'm testing as whether if you're a compensator or even if you are a social loafer, these both work for you. So I think one of the things that you can do is name a contribution kickoff. So in the first 5 minutes, you state who owns whatever task that you're doing and say it out loud because when you make that effort visible, that's easier to be held accountable for. And also when you have invisible effort, that's where the social loafing happens because you're thinking, oh, my impact doesn't matter. Making sure that you state what your task is and making it visible to everybody else. And That's where you can also be a little bit more proactive in the sense of if somebody isn't doing their work, you can be like, oh, what do you want to own? Ask them to take initiative. And if they don't, then give them something to do. And I have a tendency to give people that I don't think are as dependable, like the easier tasks, like the introduction or the conclusion. But is that really helping them? Because yes, it's annoying when people don't do their work, but also, especially early on in the project, is it unfair of you to give them such a low effort task? Because then that might signal to them that, oh, they don't think my skills are worthy. They don't think that I'm a worthy person. So why should I contribute if that's what they think? And so I think, yes, it's annoying when people don't do their work, especially for an important bit, but early on, try to just give them more than what you previously thought because maybe they are capable and maybe it will show them that they can do the work, they can do the hard things, and also lead by example. If you think that you're a hard worker, show it, and maybe other people will follow as well. Also, just think that if you are a loafer, then you're just perpetuating the issue. You're making other people also want to be social loafers. And so if you can lead by example and do the hard work, be disciplined, be on time, own your work and show it, other people might follow along the same. That's that herd mentality where when you're in a crisis, people just follow the pack. And so how can you step up and be somebody that other people admire? And how can you learn from people that you do admire? How can you step up and do the same as them? And then number two is say something earlier on. Don't just let the frustration build. Don't just complain because that does nothing. I mean, yes, it's fun to rant and yes, it gets that a little bit off your chest, but at the end of the day, it really isn't doing anything for you. And so do it one honest comment a week kind of thing. If you do it in week 2 instead of week 8, it will be so much more helpful for your results as a group mate and in your group. So if somebody maybe goes quiet, you can say, hey, I noticed you went quiet in that last meeting. Is there anything that I can do for you? Is there anything that you're not sure of? What can I do to help you? Instead of just ignoring the problem at hand, because you need to get to that conflict stage, as Patrick was saying, in that dysfunctional teamwork. You need to be able to have those open conversations and see what's the problem so then you can get to that commitment stage, which we want. We want people committed to their work just like in relationships, we want committed relationships. Well, I don't know if some do, but I sure do. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. But number 3 is also narrate when you compensate or even when you are loafing. If you do compensate for something, you can say something like, oh, I covered this because the deadline was approaching, but next time I really need you to own it. I need you to do that work. Because then you're recognizing the problem and you're also holding them accountable, but you're not saying it in a way that dehumanizes them either. You're just saying, because that deadline was approaching fast, I did it. But next time, I really need you to do it. And so you're giving them the chance to maybe say why they didn't do it, and also that the next time that they have to do it because it's proven that they haven't. And when they're aware of something that they didn't do, and then the next time, maybe that gap closes a little bit more because they're aware of it. Because I think awareness is the first step. And also, when you say it out loud, it becomes more real. And so collaboration isn't about being easy to work with or making sure that you're liked or making sure that everything's in harmony and everything's great. It's about being honest. It's about being not afraid to state your values and what you need so that the work can get done and so that economies of scale really is able to be built. And so conflict avoidance really isn't kindness, it's a choice, and it's costing you both because you're not really able to form those deep connections. And so moving on to my clarity round, which I like to do at the end, and just stating one thing that I have to unlearn to level up, and then also my non negotiables. And so, one thing that I'm having to unlearn, especially in terms of collaboration, is that is learning that conflict is really healthy. And this is an ongoing journey. And I've talked about it a lot in these episodes, but it really is. It is so important and it can be so adaptive to your personal evolution. And I ask myself this is do you want to be liked? Or do you want to be respected? And I think it's really easy to fall into the tendency of just wanting to be liked because of that human connection. It's how we are wired. We need that social connection. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that connection is really fundamental for humans. And a lot of the times in prisons, the worst format of punishment is isolation. So you can just see how important connection is to you. But connection can come through conflict. And I think that's something that's really important to remember is that when you are able to state your values and state what you want, that's where your standards start rising each time. Because when you constantly are agreeing with other people and you are saying, "Oh, that's fine if you didn't do it," but really it's not, then you're teaching them that it's okay to devalue you. It's okay for you to take up more work than actually is fair to you or to them. And so when you engage in that healthy conflict, you're able to raise your standards and also you're able to teach people like this is what you're worth. This is who you are and this is what they have to match. And so then people start to respect you. So instead of asking if they like you, ask, do you want to be respected? And I think that is so just fundamental to your personal evolution and your self worth. Next time I'm in a group project where I'm compensating a lot, which I frankly kind of am in right now, something that I'm going to do differently is stating to them their accountability issue and being like, hey, I just want to let you know that I have done a lot of this and the deadline is approaching. And next time, I really think it's important that you maybe step up a little bit. And because it wasn't really fair to me to do this. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. And it's not to belittle them and it's not to state everything that they've done is wrong, but I just think it teaches them that this isn't okay. And it also teaches you that you shouldn't have done it. And then also ask, is there something that I could have done better to allow you to contribute more or allow you to feel like you could? Because that also brings awareness that maybe you are the problem and it's letting them know that as well, that it's not all their fault. Because I think in any group work and collaboration, there are two sides to the coin. And I also think that each person is creating a system. And so if it's dysfunctional, then you're both creating that. And so really also take accountability for your own actions in that setting. And someone that I'm clearly becoming is somebody who doesn't let others change her. Because as women, especially, I feel like we take on this shape shifting role. It's like we become who other people need us to be. And there's this whole thing with gender and collaboration and typical tasks that I could get into, but we don't have time in this episode. But definitely, if that's something of interest, I will do a whole other episode about that because I just think gender is a really big influence on how group work is performed and also just in career landscape in general. But I'm watching this show called Love Story, all about John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bassett's relationship, and it's just she's such an empowering woman, and I had no idea of that. It's like she didn't want to change, and she didn't let other people change her, and I think that is something that just any individual needs to really sit with is that you don't have to change yourself for anybody else. You can be who you are, and you can be so unapologetically you. So it's not to say that you shouldn't have a little bit of introspection and where you've done wrong and maybe what your what your values are saying about you and where you're going in life, but I think it's just that self-acceptance and that self-worth grows when you are so sure in yourself and that you don't need to change for anybody else because that's artificial in a sense. You're not being who you actually are if you're keeping on changing for other people's wants and desires and demands, and then you get confused about who you are. And so, really, just being so certain in yourself is something that I am becoming. And so, I hope this episode was helpful. I hope the next time you're in maybe a not so cohesive group that you can use these little tactical steps to do. I know that I'm actively testing them out, so I'll definitely keep you in the loop about how that goes because I'm definitely still learning about how to be a better collaborator and teamwork teammate. So basically, I think the key lesson from this is that you need conflict to get to that commitment phase. Don't shy away from really having those tough conversations. So definitely screenshot this and DM me if there's been times in a group work or group dynamic that has been really frustrating. So I'd love to know and definitely share this with somebody that's maybe having a more difficult time. Maybe they can learn from it and follow along on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, all at Clearly Becoming. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read each and every one of your comments. This means the world to me that you're listening to this. And Thank you so much for being with me on this journey, on this confusing journey of building a career and also just your personal evolution in your 20s and even beyond your 20s, too. I really appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.